So good morning, my name is Leo Mark and I'm here to report about the meaning of demand forecasting. Demand forecasting is the process of using predictive analysis of historical data to estimate and predict customers' future demand for a product or service. So demand forecasting helps the business make better informed supply decision that estimates the total sales and revenue for a future period of time. Forecasting is not a speculative exercise into the unknown. It is essentially a reasonable judgment of the future probabilities of the market events based on a scientific background. Demand forecasting is an estimate of the future demand. It cannot be 100% precise, but it gives a reliable approximation regarding the possible outcome with a reasonable accuracy. It is based on a mathematical laws of probability. Demand forecasting may be undertaken at the following levels. Micro level, it refers to the demand forecasting by an individual business firm for estimating the demand for its product. Industry level, it refers to the demand estimate for the product of the industry as a whole. It is undertaken by an industrial or trade association. It relates to the market demand as a whole. Macro level, it refers to the aggregate demand for the industrial output by the nation as a whole. It is based on national income or aggregate expenditure of the country. Country's consumption function provides an estimate for the demand forecasting at macro level. Consumption function refers to the functional relationship between the disposable income and consumption. It shows the propensity to consume or different levels consumption expenditure by the community at varying levels of income. With the growth of national income, consumption expenditure increases, as such as overall demand for goods and services. The significance of demand forecasting in business. Production planning. Demand forecasting is a prerequisite for the production planning of a business firm. Expansion of output of the firm should be based on estimates of likely demand. Otherwise, there may be overproduction and consequent losses may have to be faced. Sales forecasting. Sales forecasting is based on the demand forecasting. Promotional efforts of the firm should be based on sales forecasting. Control of business. For controlling the business on a sound footing, it is essentially to have a well-conceived budgeting of costs and profits that is based on a forecast of annual demand, sales, and prices. Inventory control. A satisfactory control of business inventories, raw materials, intermediate goods, semi-finished product, finished products, spare parts, and etc. Requires a satisfactory estimates of the future requirements of which can be traced through demand forecasting. So, growth and long-term investment programs. Demand forecasting is necessary for determining the rate of the firm's long-term investment programs and planning. Stability. Stability is in production and employment over a period of time can be made effective by the management in the light of suitable forecasting about market demand and other business variables and smoothing of the business operations through counter-cyclical and seasonally adjusted business programs. So, economic planning and policy making. Demand forecasting at macro level for the nation as a whole is a great help for the planners and policymakers for better planning and rational allocation of the country's production resources. The government can determine important and export policies in the view of long-term demand forecasting for various goods in the country. Short-term and long-term forecasting. Short-term forecasting normally relates to a period not exceeding a year. Some writers like Professor E.J. Douglas 1994 prefers to use the term demand estimation for a short-term demand forecasting. To him, demand estimation refers to the determination of the volume current demand for a firm product for a short period, say over a month or a year. Short-term forecasts relate to the day-to-day particulars which are concerned tactical decisions under a given resource constraints, as in the short run, the available resources, scale of operation, etc. are fixed and unalterable by and large. In short-term forecasting, a firm primarily concerned with the optimum utilization of its existing production. Evolving sales policy. A short-term demand forecasting is useful in evolving suitable sales policy in a view seasonal variation of demand, and so it's to avoid the problem of short supply and overproduction of firms' products in the market. Determining the price policy. Short-term sales forecasting will help the firm in determination of suitable price policy to clear off the stocks during off-season and to take advantage of the peak of season. Evolving a purchase policy. In the view of short-term forecasting of material prices, a firm can evolve a rational purchase policy for buying raw materials and control its inventory stocks with a greater economy. Fixation of sales targets. Demand and sales forecasting in the short term helps the business firm in setting sales targets and for establishing controls over the business. It is now fixing high sales targets with sales forecasting reveals and decline in a quarter. Determining short-term financial planning. Short-term financial policy and planning can be suitable determined on the basis short-term demand forecasting. Firms need a cash depends on the production and sales. Without sales forecasting, a rational financial planning is not possible. Long-term forecasting refers to the forecast prepared for a long period which the firm's scale of operations or the production capacity may be expanded or reduced. Long-term forecasts are normally for periods exceeding a year, usually 3 to 5 years or even decade or more. Functionally, the long periods of which permits alternations in the scale of production differ from the industry to industry and firm to firm. A long-term forecasting relates to those informations which are vital for undertaking strategic decisions of business and pertaining to the expansion or contraction over a period of time. In business decision making, long-term forecasting may serve the following purposes. Business planning. Long-term forecasting is a great assistant in long-term business planning. Long-term demand potential will provide a required guidance or planning of a business unit for the expansion of existing one. Capital budgeting by firms based on a long-term demand forecasting. Manpower planning. It is essential to determine long-term sales forecasts for an appropriate manpower planning by the firm in view of long-term growth and progress of the business. Long-term financial planning. Finance is kingpin of modern business in the view of long-term demand and sales and forecasting of the production planning. It becomes easier for the firm to determine its long-term financial planning and programs for raising the funds from the capital market. And thank you, that's all.